Hey!
What's up?
What's up? Oh, hey, look, it's my favorite Slash pairing.
I'm actually really happy that we're doing Rawls and Nozick specifically, because I don't think I said this on mic, but I've been speculating for some time that Rawls and or Nozick would get featured, but I also kind of figured like we wouldn't get liberalism again from Rawls after we already got Locke's version.
Right.
And we also kind of figured we'd get some like more cartoonish, caricaturable version of libertarianism like Rand rather than Nozick. So I'm glad actually we're getting these two specific figures.
This will be fun. I knew nothing about them until you gave me a crash course between episodes. So.
Can't wait to find out how inaccurate my crash course is. I will admit I have never read any of the books by either. All I know of them is from like seeing them referenced in other things and then looking at the Wikipedia article.
And being like, hey, that's cool. What am I going to do? This is worse than ever.
Ari, thank God. She's finally awake again.
Ugh, was I trying to cross the border? Oh, sorry. She did that on her own.
Oh.
Jen, you're back. Does that mean that Dad is... Hi, Ari. Dad! Sorry, I ran off. I needed some time to think. But you got yourself a good roommate. She helped me talk through it. And Marcus is pretty cool, too. We bonded over sweater vests.
They're comfy and easy to wear.
I see you. The middle-aged version of Shorts Kid from Pokemon. Dad, you don't need to be sorry. Mom was... She's really... Things have gotten bad since you left. She's just kind of shut down. Yeah, and we saw the end of it. Fanon sure got under her skin, huh? Pythia always hated therapy, but that was something else.
Seeing Pythia give up like that was just... hard to watch. I thought that if anyone could make a difference, she could.
Wow, I underestimated how much these two believed in her. Hey, listen, everyone. I've seen Pythia this upset just once before. It was not fun. But when she pulled herself out of it, well, that's when she decided to run for office.
Oh, right. And shortly after that, you two separate...
What is important here is that she'll pull through this. I know she will. We just need to have her back. No more chucking notes through the portal, though, right? I make no such promises. I'm not returning to death, Ariadne Jones. Mom? Mom, where are you? Oh, sitting outside the Subway shop. Got it. All right. Come on, get up off the floor. Come on.
Why are you back here? It's over, Adney.
It's not over, Mom. My original answer didn't work. That's baffling, but there's more we can do. You can't just back down. You have to keep trying.
Whoever said that was a fool.
You said that when you first got here.
Well then, point made. I am the queen of fools. I've been lying for so long, Adney, to myself, to everyone, putting on this optimistic, patriotic mask, trying to ignore everything clearly broken around me, smiling as I cut my feet on the glass.
Okay, yeah, things are really messed up, but... Okay, you know what? I'm not the right person to convince someone to be less jaded.
If I may.
Please, Arbiter.
I have a plan that could help the senator sort through her current motivational miasma. It could also address the disillusionment you have expressed from the very beginning. Let me guess, debate another dead guy? No, that approach clearly isn't working. So it's time to debate two dead guys. An exciting twist, yes?
God damn it! Sure, Arbiter.
Then allow me to introduce John Rawls and Robert Nozick.
Oh, I've read that fanfic before.
Both professors at Harvard, these men had profound influence on the political left and right, respectively. Please, you give me too much credit, Arbiter. Do you want to be Nozick?
Do you want to be both?
I think if it's silly if I'm both if they're going to be talking at the same time like this.
Okay, you think it's silly?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
What?
Oh, I think you said it was going to be...
I didn't mean silly in a good way.
Oh, drop the modesty, John. Remember what the Guardian said in your obituary?
I wouldn't know, Robert. I was dead.
So was I, 10 months earlier, but all information is available here, you know. The English-speaking world has lost its leading political philosopher.
Well, if we're quoting obituaries, the Telegraph called you the greatest American philosopher since William James.
Are you sure about this, Arbiter? They sound like they're jacking each other off.
What they do off camera is of no business of ours. Growing up in the United States, you likely have a pre-existing allegiance to some variation of their ideas. Engaging both will force you to switch perspectives more readily than you otherwise would. This is your grand plan. Deliberately mimic the nonsense ideal within real life. It's not nonsense. Political debate furthers the discourse and challenges our stances, helping us make society better for all.
John's right, though. Frankly, he should have accepted that my utopian principles are superior by now.
If you can consider your principles utopian and not part of a financially obsessed dystopia...
What? What does that mean? I care about plenty of things that aren't money. I always say people who like sunsets are just as valid as people who like yachts.
You only say that when pretending the rich are discriminated against. The focus has always been on defending the yachts, not the sunsets.
Oh, well, at least I'm not a covert authoritarian.
You don't mean that.
Reason for debate. Debate is a test of ideas meant to help us decide what principles are best. Interesting.
Very rich hearing the guy who suggested that selling oneself into slavery should be allowed suggest the other guy is the covert authoritarian.
I know, it's very good. Utility beyond money. If you view transactions only monetarily, you miss other benefits, like sunsets, apparently. Covert fascist. My opponent is a covert fascist.
Wow, I love that we get another bad one.
Sunsets? Yachts? Ah! Stop, please. Rawls, Nozick, I know you've been at this for a while, but can we slow down and stop flooding my idea slate, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Jones.
Yes, as am I. It's just, he's so wrong about absolutely everything. God, this really is like the real world, huh?
Let's just start with just one of you, shall we? The rest should flow from there.
Hey, my jacket switched sides when I turned around. Well, John, would you like to start?
If I must, I suppose your work was mainly a response to mine.
Not just a response to you, my work had its own. Please, you could do that later.
There is a common reason governments fail. One your previous debate with Fanon covered in stark detail. That rhymed.
Hey, that did rhyme.
Right, turns out people hate each other, which is why this is all pointless and I should just rot here. In fact, I'm going to lay down on the ground again.
No, Mom, don't. It's sturdy down there and you'll have to repress your pantsuit.
No,
I saw your ironing bill last time.
I just have to have the idea of pressing my pantsuit here.
God damn it. This place is bad for you.
Oh, well, it can get pretty dire, yes? But if we adopt the right mindset, we can make real headway on this issue. We simply must deal with the problem at its source. All societies are fundamentally cooperative ventures. To succeed, they must draw forth the willing cooperation of all. Yet most governments cannot escape inherent bias. Those in power help themselves, undermining cooperation. Imagine instead that every decision maker was stripped of all knowledge of their particular lot in life and placed behind a veil of ignorance. With no knowledge of their status, participants wouldn't be able to rig the game in their favor. Such leaders would be compelled to design a fair system, one that guarantees willing cooperation from all citizens. By placing ourselves behind the veil of ignorance, we assume the original position. Episode title right there, assume the position. A state before self and thus before self-interest. Ah, yes, the original position. When this idea was first proposed, the intelligible realm was abuzz. Immanuel Kant was especially impressed. I'm aware we've exchanged autographs. They would. They so would. They so would. Rawls is definitely like a sort of political Kantianism, I would say. Like, I don't know. We did Critique of Pure Reason, but do you know anything about Kant's ethics and like
No,
categorical
I don't.
imperative
I can't
and
say
stuff?
that I did.
It's worth reading about, but Kant very much thought that what was moral was a matter of what you could rationally will that all folks do is what's moral, and that reasoned individuals could come to an agreement on this, that there are things like we can't will that murder is fine, because if everybody murdered all the time, then we'd all be dead, and that would rule it out.
Oh,
And
wait,
that's-
there's a pithy name for this, right? Some test of, what is this?
And the categorical imperative is the name I know
Yeah.
it by. But this is, Rawls' idea is not so different from that. Like, the political system we want is one that we can reasonably will if we don't know which person we're going to be in it.
Right.
And the things that we might selfishly will for ourselves, if we assume we're going to be sitting on top of the pack, we can't reasonably will if we're going to be sitting on the bottom of the pack and suffering the consequences. So by taking this sort of rational position outside of our interests,
Mm-hmm.
he thinks that we can reach
And by this process, deduce some commonalities in what we all assume would be and what we all would want in an ideal government.
yeah. Whether he succeeds or not, we'll see.
Yeah.
You can form your own conclusion as we go along and debate against him, but it's fun. It's fun, and it's a neat
and it's
argument to
practical
consider.
philosophy.
It is.
Not sure how I feel about all this information.
So you think if all my fellow senators could just forget who they are, we'd be golden?
Okay, Mom, you're really depressed, and that's just making you go through a whole bunch of.
Oh my
Bad
God!
arguments at the moment?
I have a new political ideology.
Okay, what's your?
Mine-
No, honey, all of your. Okay, what is it?
My new political ideology is I'm the person who read Rawls and totally missed the points, and I've decided that the ideal form of government is one where we have a representative government, but the decision makers get mind wiped, like the Men in Black pen, or like what's that one show? There's that one dystopian sci-fi show where people go to work, but they have to have their identities wiped.
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I really like the premise of that one. What is Severance? I think.
Yeah. So, yes, the idea is that the ideal form of government is Congress, but they have to do that when they go in so that they can't do stuff that enriches themselves at others' expense because they don't know who they are anymore. That's my new political ideology.
My ideal government is one that is run by an all-knowing computer that can determine, based on first principles, what anyone's individual likelihood to commit crimes is. And let's say that maybe it assigns it a color or a hue.
I see. So what you want is I have no mouth and I must scream, right? That's the sci-fi work you were going for?
Yes, that's the sci-fi work I was going for, correct.
Anyway, I've taken us far astray. You're getting hung up on non-ideal theory, Senator, but we must first establish our ideal theory.
Ideal theory?
Ideal political theory assumes ideal conditions, people willing to comply with whatever rules are chosen in a society sufficiently well off to support them. It helps establish the target, and you need the target before solving for potential complications.
That is sensible. Yeah, like, okay, yeah, we're not saying, like, we're accepting that this is ideal, but by knowing the ideal and what we're shooting for, we can then, deal with the stuff that comes up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure, man.
The original position may be impossible for us to fully attain, but it's the perfect decision-making target. Fine, whatever, I'll try anything at this point. Marcus, if you're watching, we're switching our research to an amnesia machine. Maybe I can use it to forget this whole travesty.
The perfect decision-making target. We'll see about that. Come on, Ariadne, let's ask a few questions of this, my old chum. Oh, are you helping? Of course, I couldn't leave you to fend for yourself against the diabolical John Rawls. Well, we should get started. Also like that they died within 10 months of each other.
Yeah. When I was looking at the Wikipedia for their death dates, I was so hoping that it was like same week, same month, same year. Like these two old
Yeah.
sworn enemies were heartbroken when one of them was gone and had to move on to the next worlds to go debate in the intelligible realm.
Oh, without my number one enemy here, what am I to do? All right. All societies are fundamentally cooperative ventures. To succeed, they must draw forth willing cooperation of all. Can you clarify that for me?
Variants of this idea have been repeated in other debates. It boils down to this. If people dislike their government, they will overthrow their government. So a government must be viewed favorably to last, and the only way to successfully get the cooperation of all is to serve all.
Seems reasonable. What reasoning supports that statement?
It may take months, it may take years, but a lack of willing cooperation will destroy any government. After all, why would citizens willingly obey a government they do not approve of? You yourself established this quite well in your counters to Machiavelli.
And how's that connected to the rest of your argument?
This is one of the key tenets of a successful government. As I lay out my principles, it will become clear that they fit this tenet quite well.
Okay. Yet most governments cannot escape inherent bias. Those in power help themselves, undermining cooperation. Can you clarify that for me?
A government that does not serve its people instead serves the people in government.
That was really pithy, actually. Great job. What reasoning do you have to support that statement?
People bring with them a set of self-serving preferences and biases. These biases naturally tempt individuals to rig the game in favor of others like themselves. Now, given our world's limited resources, some attempt to justify this behavior as necessary to survive. But left unchecked, especially in powerful positions or when determining a constitution, this tendency becomes very dangerous. It can permanently skew society in favor of one demographic, which, as we've learned, will lead to collapse in the long term.
Yeah, plenty of history's made that apparent, huh? God, stop it with the idea slate! Limited resources. There are only so many resources to go around. Ultimately, we have to make do with what we have. Self-interest. Many individuals are incapable of seeing beyond their own wants and needs and act for themselves alone. Is that going to be the objection? Like, how are self-interested people supposed to go behind this veil of ignorance here?
Maybe. I bet, though, that that's going to come in later because he wants us to focus on the ideal first. So
Right. In
that'd
the
probably
ideal,
be-
everyone would be able to.
Yeah, that'd probably be his objection if we tried that. Oh, well, yeah, of course in practice lots of people can't, but we aren't looking at practice
Right, this is
yet.
ideal,
We're
not
trying
non-ideal.
to What?
'Cause like you said, we're working on the ideal first,
Yeah.
not the non-ideal. Yeah, okay. How's that connected to the rest of your argument?
This establishes the problem my philosophy will solve.
Well, all right. Imagine instead that every decision maker was stripped of all knowledge of their particular lot in life, placed behind a veil of ignorance. Can you clarify that for me?
Participants would not know their age, race, gender, intelligence, work ethic, sexual orientation, anything that might favor or disfavor them. That amnesia machine actually won't be enough. People stripped of such knowledge are said to be behind a veil of ignorance. You can alternatively refer to them as being in the original position, a state before self-awareness.
Couldn't decide which term you liked more, huh?
They have slightly different uses. One refers to the state you enter, the other to how you enter it.
And what reasoning do you have to support this statement?
It's a thought experiment. There isn't really anything to back up. I already explained to the senator how, even if this ideal state isn't perfectly achievable, picturing how people would behave in it is still helpful.
Okay. And how's that connected to the rest of your argument?
Understanding the nature of the original position helps us get to the mindset we need to solve our essential problems.
All right. With no knowledge of their status, participants wouldn't be able to rig the game in their favor. Can you clarify that for me?
Those who don't know who they are forced to plan for the possibility of being anyone.
That was grammatically correct. It is just kind of garden pathy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a confusing sentence.
The only way to ensure their own well-being is to act for the benefit of society as a whole.
They wouldn't be able to at all? How can that be true?
Let's revisit a common example involving human self-interest. Given the world's limited resources, those in power are often tempted to steal resources from the vulnerable. But leaders who don't know their own identities can't act on such temptation. If they treat any group poorly, they risk discovering that they, themselves, are a member of the mistreated group.
So the only way not to screw themselves over is to not screw anyone at all?
That is, accurate and succinct, if crudely worded.
Yeah, it's like, how could you build a society with racial oppression if
You
didn't know what race you were when you were building it. You could pick a random skin color and say, we're going to say, fuck those guys in particular, but then you'd have no idea if that was going to be you on the other end of it. So,
Okay. Well, what if we just make the odds really in our favor? What if I decide Omolus?
what?
What if I just go for Omolus? There's only a 1 in however many billion chance I'm the Omolus kid, right? So as long as I can, and I feel pretty confident about those odds that I out of all people in this world am not going to turn out to be the Omolus kid.
That's actually a really fun objection to this. That's fun. I hadn't thought about that. But there are definitely cases where we make a decent number of people's lives very slightly nicer by making a much smaller number of people's lives really fucking terrible.
Or in a more positive sense, we can make people's lives in general a lot better by taking on some very mild risks. Like being like driving is a risk.
Mm-hmm.
People die while driving, but we decide that it's an acceptable risk to take because it, in principle, makes things better. So I don't know that Rawls is... I like what he's saying, but it feels like also that even in the ideal position, we still have room to be like, well, why not Omolus?
In conclusion, driving cars is exactly the same as those who walk away from Omelas.
Yes. In this case, yes.
And all other cases.
People would be safer if we didn't let them drive cars. We choose to accept that level of risk because we think it'll make life better, knowing full well that people will die in car accidents.
I'm trying so hard not to go on this tangent because I love the driving example because it's something that literally no political ideology that I hear from folks handles well.
Uh-huh.
Whether it's about, libertarian guaranteed rights to certain things like life, liberty, and property, or whether it's about, liberal framings of equity and so on, or whether it's more radical things entirely. It's really, really often the case that, but what about cars? It sure seems like we want to drive those, and yet they kill huge numbers of people and also destroy the environment.
Yep.
Is a counterexample to very many of those views at the same time, which people often don't think of.
Anyway, back to what we were talking about. How is that connected to the rest of your argument?
All governments depend on willing cooperation, yes?
Wait, is Le Guin in the intelligible realm? Or is she in the literary realm?
The literary realm sounds more annoying because when you're hungry, you have to write about the delicious meal. You can't just think about it.
That's true.
Well, removing selfishness from designing the system will result in a fair system. A societal structure that would certainly result in the needed cooperation.
Okay. Such leaders would be compelled to design a fair system, one that guarantees willing cooperation from all citizens. Does that include the Omolus kid? Does that mean the Omolus kid is in favor of being the Omolus kid? Can you clarify that for I'm not going to explain what that story is about. Go read it if you haven't yet.
Under the veil of ignorance, leaders have no choice but to pursue fairness. And if the system is fair, all citizens will stand behind it.
Are the citizens also behind this veil?
No. The veil is only a temporary state applied to leaders at the moment of decision.
I guess stripping everyone's identity forever is too sci-fi even for a thought experiment.
That's what we have to do to make the perfect society. Nobody should know who they are at any given time. Once we're all anonymous, everything will become perfect. Thank you, John Rawls. I get it now. I understand Rawls.
Just a bunch of people completely removed from their own lives playing a big game of Civ 6.
Yes, exactly. Man, I love misunderstanding political philosophers.
What reasoning do you have to support that statement?
This seems pretty self-evident. If the government structures society fairly, no reasonable citizen could object to it.
I certainly object to it. Am I unreasonable?
You're both unreasonable. Everyone's unreasonable. Everything is unreasonable. I'm going back to the floor now. With the worms, where I belong.
How's that connected to the rest of your argument?
This is my overall point, and the reason the original position is effective. It creates a society that benefits all. And a society that benefits all is a society everyone will approve of, is it not?
Well, let's see.
John has such high-minded ideals, it's almost noble.
I take it you have some objections?
Of course I do, but I can't just tell you what I think. That'd be no fun. But I'll vaguely gesture. Consider the problem he's trying to solve, Ariadne, and who he's really solving it for.
Huh. Well, back to the top, I guess. Let's see what we have to work with here. These are the two that we got from this argument.
Yep.
And since we had to go out of our way to get them, I don't think that they could be used as answers later on.
I think maybe they could. I think we should look at all of the ones that we have got.
All right, let's start from the top.
Yeah.
Reason for debate. Debate is a test of ideas meant to help us decide what principles are best. If you view transactions only monetarily, you miss other benefits, like sunsets, apparently. Maybe that's something like that. Like if you no, that takes a stretch to get there. I was gonna say if you view designing these decisions only in terms of like one metric, in this case, like what is everyone can agree on, you miss some other benefits. I don't know. I'm struggling on that one. Covert fascist. My opponent is a covert fascist. Limited resources. There are only so many resources to go around. Ultimately, we have to make do with what we have. Self-interest. Many individuals are incapable of seeing beyond their own wants and needs and act for themselves alone.
Okay, I think self-interest on the last point might be one of them. What's the last one say again? Such leaders would be compelled to design. No. Oh, one that guarantees will and cooperation from all citizens. Even if this guarantees a fair system, the
Selfish people
systems
still
being
exist.
fair doesn't guarantee cooperation from all citizens. I think that's it.
Yes. Hey, Rawls. Successful governments require willing cooperation, correct?
Correct.
And cooperation falls apart when leaders put their own interests first?
Also correct. The people see that the government is not looking out for them. This is the value of the original position. It gives leaders perspective to choose what is most just for everyone.
Most just for everyone, huh? Gotta say, it's a nice ideal. But now we must face the non-ideal. This won't actually produce willing cooperation.
What?
Oh, I see your angle. This should be good.
Why are you always smiling? That's really unnerving, actually. The original position tackles bias for decision makers, but does nothing about the rest of society. And when the decisions come down, people won't simply fall in line.
But if the resulting society is good for everyone...
Good is not great, Rawls, and people want society to be great for themselves. I assume neither of you played video games in your philosophical retirement homes, but bear with me, okay? In this game I play, Battle Bakers 2, developers are constantly rebalancing the character types. They make some stronger and others weaker in order to create better gameplay. It's not a perfect process, but most of the time they succeed. New dynamics emerge and the game is kept fresh. But most players don't care about the whole game. They only gripe about changes to their own characters. Those monsters cut the productivity of cookie cutters by 15%. Who cares if the gingerbread rush combo was previously overpowered?
Gingerbread Rush. Are you positing that our lives are part of some game? Would explain all the twists I've been put through.
What? No, don't be ridiculous. This isn't a game, God. But if people can't see beyond themselves in a game where the stakes are far lower, how can you ever expect them to do so in real life?
Oh.
Boils down to this, Rawls. People struggle to put themselves in others' shoes, especially when they benefit from not doing so. All they see is how decisions affect them. Or as Fanon would point out, people like them. So even if they only lose a little in pursuit of a better whole, they'll still believe their government neglects them. They'll kick and scream and complain loudly on social media. There are a lot of nice things about your thought experiment, but an ability to unite everyone isn't one of them.
So even if the government could adopt this unbiased state, we'd still be doomed.
Oh my God, go back to the floor for a little bit.
Marcus, cancel the amnesia machine.
Oh, very slick, Ariadne Jones. It was astute of you to respect the self-interest of individuals, something old Rawls here always seems to lose sight of.
I mean, whether I respect it or not,
People will find the systems their leaders choose unfair, no matter the leader's intentions. When you distribute resources according to a pattern, some will lose something. It is inevitable. And no one ever asks the impacted citizens for their consent now, do they? There's no such thing as fair redistribution. Patterned principles are inherently unjust.
Huh? What the fuck? Wait, hold on, Nozick. Why are patterned principles unjust?
Excuse me?
My objection to rules was that it seemed difficult to choose a pattern everyone would like. That's more about how people would respond than the rules themselves. But you're saying such rules are inherently bad. Why?
John, you know what this means?
Naturally.
Oh,
Change places!
places!
What just happened?
Robert is about to present one of his, different ideas. As he provided limited support when you challenged me, I shall do the same as you challenge him.
It only seems fair, after all. You'll need all the help you can get. My logic is incredibly sound. I've even brought slides.
He brought slides. Slideshow.
He's in it.
Let's say we redistribute wealth, achieving whatever spread we deem acceptable. We'll call this D1.
Or P1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and Wilt.
But suddenly, Wilt Chamberlain appears. He's decided to play again, and everyone wants to see the game. When all is said and done, Wilt could amass more money than anyone else. A new pattern has emerged, D2. Every transaction was voluntary, but our ideal wealth distribution is broken. So any pattern would demand we cancel the game or take Wilt's earnings. Patterned principles will constantly violate people's liberty to freely exchange what they want. And there we go. I really like Wilt Chamberlain. How's he doing these days?
I don't know. I thought it was really cool seeing LeBron James on the court with his own son. Real Ken Griffey Jr. energy there.
You've always favored colorful thought experiments, Nozick, and I'll admit the diagrams are quite nice.
Thank you.
Indeed, I'd expect nothing less from the creator of the utility monster.
Oh, he's that
That's
guy?
the other one.
He's
That's
that guy?
the other one. I forgot.
Oh, no. Oh, okay.
I love the utility monster.
I like... Way to bury the lead.
See, this is great because this guy, unlike if we got somebody like Rand,
Right.
Nozick has a lot of thought put into this and has some very strong points. Like the utility monster argument, I would argue, is actually a really good argument against utilitarianism.
Yeah. It's like... The one thing I'd say about him is that he doesn't seem like an unreasoned person. Like, it doesn't seem like his positions are... Like, whether... Like... I don't know whether or not they're ex post facto attempts to justify what he wants to believe, but they definitely are reasonable and well thought out and unlike Rand, whose philosophy seems to be more like an art.
I'll say, I think ex post facto is interesting wording to say because I think that's exactly the problem with this argument here. And I'm curious if you look at that first slide, if you can tell me what the problem is.
Is that Wilt's at the same thing as everyone to begin with? And that therefore that's not really ideal? I don't know.
How'd we get to that distribution?
He just kind of assumed that everyone wanted it to be equal.
He didn't even assume that. He just assumed that we were in this state. And then we moved to another state.
I see.
He thinks that a pattern principle that redistributes things from one state to another is unjust. But how did the wealth get there in the first place? We were never not redistributing it in some way or another. We already got to this point we're at now. And it's not like every piece of wealth in human history was voluntarily transacted. Indeed, on the grand scale of things, very little of it was. So, the argument you really have to make is not moving from slide 1 to slide 2 is just. It is that moving to slide 2 is more just
than moving
somewhere else, given that we weren't in slide 1. We were in some other.
Right. And I get that he's saying it's a thought experiment. He I do get that what he's saying is that let's imagine you've had it your way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's imagine that you do get it the way you want and that everyone does have it distributed it equitably.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. and that and under like what he's saying is like under your own principles that would fall apart because people want to go see Wilt Chamberlain.
That's fair. That's a good Steelman case for this. I would buy that as a reason to abandon my angle of attack for now.
Yeah, because I think, to be fair to him, he's not insisting that's where we are now. He's saying like in the best case scenario, like if this is like if imagining you have it your way is I don't know that he says that, and yours thing is still valid. Like he is starting from a starting point that doesn't match up with reality, and that trick is a really good way to sneak by false premises. Especially if you're talking really, like, I believe it's called the let's say.
To be fair, I don't mean to say that it's about the starting point not matching up with reality. I mean to say that this style of reasoning always has to assume a starting point. Even if we did assume one that lines up with reality, then how did we get to that distribution of wealth? How did we get to the previous one?
Right.
The fact is that we haven't got there by these purely
Distributions
voluntary
of wealth.
movements from one state to another.
Right.
So we're already not in a state that we should consider good. And then
Anyway-
why should it matter if we move voluntarily from that to another one? That would also still not be just if it was already unjust. That's the kind of case I'd want to make.
Anyway, I've got tickets to go to the athletic realm to watch Wilt. You coming, Rolls?
Is Wilt Chamberlain dead?
I think so.
I don't
Let's
know
double
that.
check that, actually.
I don't know that for certain, and I don't want to just blithely claim he's in the afterlife when he might not be.
He could be so good at basketball that he's in the afterlife despite being alive.
He just ascended.
1999. He died.
1999. Okay. Yep.
Anyway,
But I do have a question for you. Who is this Wilt Chamberlain?
Oh, Arbiter, my poor, poor man. Sometimes I forget just how ancient you are.
he was the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, right?
Yeah, that one. Actually, I don't know who that is either. Is he a streamer or something? What's up, YouTube? I'm here to dunk some balls.
Oh my. Oh no, is my topical reference outdated? Am I the old one?
Wilt Chamberlain was a famous basketball player, Miss Jones. Started with the Globetrotters, ended with the Lakers.
It's cool how he started his career with, playing, like, I'm not shitting the Globetrotters because what they do is very athletically impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, to a degree, fun because it's not serious.
Yeah. Did you hear about that one time that they accidentally lost?
To the Senators?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not about them winning. It's just about they play the game and silly stuff happens, right?
But it is supposed to be about them winning in the end. They are always supposed to come out on top, but there's been at least one case where
the
they just
Senators.
they fucked around too long and ran out of time and lost.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, I don't really care much for sports, but
Yes, that must be it. Surely my references are still hip with the kids of today.
I know who Wilt Chamberlain was.
To be fair, though, we watched Nerd YouTube.
I knew who Wilt Chamberlain was because my dad got me into basketball when I was younger. And if I hadn't learned then, I would have learned who Wilt Chamberlain was when I started reading 100 Bullets. Since one of the sections in that comic is named after him, and I would have had to be like, why is that called that?
Reading what?
100 Bullets?
What is that?
Comic book.
Huh.
I've got a couple paperbacks of it. I'll show it to you sometime. Pretty good. As hip as philosophy in general, I suppose.
Philosophy is cool. Philosophy is cute and pop.
Very pop and cute. Next, you're gonna tell me that you're super paper, huh?
Shall we begin?
Where's my mouse? There it is. Sure, let's see what Nozick knows.
Okay,
It's literally,
here we go.
let's say.
Here we go. Okay. I retract my line of reasoning.
He literally pulls the let's say on us.
I retract my line of reasoning.
Okay. Can you clarify what you're saying here for me? Your chart shows everyone starting with the same cash. Are you assuming that's the pattern we'd apply?
Not at all! I'm only showing a flat distribution because it's easy to track the changes visually. A starting distribution could also be like this. Or like this. All that matters is that we've chosen an ideal pattern of wealth and achieved it.
And what reasoning do you have to support that statement?
This isn't really the sort of statement that one needs to support. It's just kind of the initial setup to the argument, so we're assuming that we've succeeded at any of the various distributive ideals.
How is this connected to the rest of your argument?
This assumes we've achieved the gem of Rawls, Marx, or any other philosopher who believes in patterned principles. Starting with such an assumption makes it easy to highlight the issues they have.
The issues you have.
When I'm done, dear John, I won't be the only one who sees the problems. But suddenly, Wilt Chamberlain appears, decided to play again, and everyone wants to pay to see the game.
Can you clarify that for me?
Wilt Chamberlain, famous basketball player, is playing a game. People want to see him play.
But how does he appear so suddenly? Is he also a wizard?
Wilt would walk into the scene normally. I was just embellishing.
The statement gets updated.
The statement gets updated!
No, I'm not going to make you update your statement for that, Nozick. How Wilt enters isn't relevant. When we got an achievement for that, too. Because that was all of the dialogue from the Arbiter involving his strange wizard obsession. That's the achievement we just got. Why would everyone want to see Wilt Chamberlain play?
Excuse me?
I just don't understand why people go crazy about athletes doing athlete stuff.
It's a thought experiment. Wilt Chamberlain could easily be substituted for anything a large group would want to see. But you understand if you've ever seen him play. It's unfortunate he passed on even before I did.
Oh, so he's dead? This would be a spooky zombie basketball game? Maybe I would pay to see that.
Sure. Yes, everyone will pay because they want to see spooky zombies play basketball. The reason people want to pay doesn't really matter, as long as there's something that people want to pay for.
And how's that connected to the rest of your argument?
It establishes the thought experiment is core to my argument.
And when all's said and done, Wilt could amass more money than anyone else. A new pattern has emerged. D2. Can you clarify that for me?
I must admit, I'm not sure how to clarify this beyond what is shown on the chart. If everyone gives Wilt Chamberlain money, the result is that Wilt has a lot of money.
And what reasoning do you have to support that statement?
I could present a mathematical proof, I suppose, but seems kind of like overkill. Aren't you an accountant? It's just simple arithmetic. If you take a bit from 2,000 equal piles, transfer the sum to a final one, the piles are no longer equal. I mean, look. Not the same anymore, you see?
Yeah, I see. How's that connected to the rest of your argument?
It establishes the results of the thought experiment, setting up our conclusion.
Every transaction was voluntary, but our ideal wealth distribution was broken. So any pattern would demand we cancel the game or take Wilt's earnings. Can you clarify that for me?
Any pattern that cares about maintaining some distribution of wealth will be broken the moment anyone does anything. Even if all actions are taken voluntarily, they'd have to be undone to restore the ideal distribution.
And what reasoning do you have to support that statement?
Every single person in this thought experiment participated willingly. And willing action should intuitively be allowed.
That's an unstated principle.
Sure is.
But if we're trying to maintain a pattern of wealth, we'll have to intervene, either before the transaction or after, to maintain our pattern. Given this, it seems clear that pattern-based principles are covertly authoritarian.
Thanks for the backup there, Rawls. Just looking really anxious over my shoulder. And how's that connected to the rest of your argument?
It is the crux of it, my dear. Any pattern that manages wealth will have to be constantly maintained, and this maintenance inevitably interferes with the economic choices of consenting adults. Pattern principles will constantly violate people's liberty to freely exchange for what they want.
Can you clarify that for me?
Any significant transaction will break our distributive ideal. And thus, in order to maintain the ideal, we would have to constantly interfere with these transactions.
And what reasoning do you have to support that statement?
My previous statements will illustrate this point. Patterned principles of justice require constant interference in people's lives.
And how's that connected to the rest of your argument?
It is my overall point, my dear girl. Distributive ideals do not work in practice.
Well, his charts are pretty hard to argue with. It's a good chart.
If you accept the assumptions in the charts, I have to say I feel a little straw man.
Oh, wait till I show you chart number 3.
Every time I see a graph prove a point, I ask myself what data it's not showing. Doesn't matter, your grandma never asks questions before sending them to her bingo friends. What's the point of checking facts if no one checks the fact checks?
I do, Mom. There's something missing here. I'll find it. All right. So again, it looks like Rawls is also about the assumptions that Nozick is making here. Maybe the limited resources bit?
Could be that. Could also be in some way the it's not only about money thing.
Right. Utility beyond money. It's like, yeah, like that's not the only thing being transacted here. People are receiving, like he's looking at one idea or like one part of this chart, which is money. And yeah, the money part of that chart has changed, but so has our ability to watch. So has the part of the chart that's being able to watch Wilt Chamberlain play basketball. You know, they've gotten something out of this.
I don't think that's an argument against him though. I think that's what he agrees with.
Okay.
So they got something out of spending their money, so they should be allowed to make a more unequal society. So maybe I feel better about your first idea then than about my idea.
About limited
it's in
resources?
some way about limited resources.
Okay.
But what?
Pattern principles will constantly violate people's liberty to freely exchange for what they want.
Is it limited resources here? People aren't fully free to exchange for what they want because
Yeah,
there's
I
a
think
finite
so.
amount of stuff? Maybe?
Oh, the music's still going. So this is something they anticipated, but it's not the correct answer.
Interesting.
But Nozick, it's quite likely they won't be able to get what they want anyway because of limitations on resources.
I'd like to question the connection of that observation. There's very little bearing on the overall point I'm making. Because it's possible for something else to interfere with transactions doesn't mean that it's okay for patterned principles to do so.
I thought I had him.
It was a good thought, though, Miss Jones. Perhaps keep it stowed away for another time.
Okay, so it's going to come up again. What else could it be? Self-interest it won't be because he thinks that's good.
Maybe it is utility beyond money.
Let's try it. Somewhere. But where? Rawls wants us to question the assumptions behind the charts. What are they? This is so going to
Maybe
turn out...
self-interest to this one? I guess it doesn't, because he also pointed out it doesn't matter what the starting is, only that it changed, right?
Yeah. I'm going to be so mad when the answer turns out to be a thing we already said yet again.
I mean, that's the thing is that, like, again, it's part of the game being a game, right?
Yep.
We shouldn't feel bad about that. Let's challenge this one.
With what?
Like
Utility beyond... I mean, sure, let's do it. Let's see what happens.
Okay, Nozick, here's what's wrong with your argument.
Oh, how exciting! No, wait, this isn't exciting at all! You're just wrong!
I am?
You are.
Okay. It's confusing. The first three all seem like just, here are some...
Oh, I didn't mean to hit clarify there. I'm sorry.
The first three all just seem like, here are some premises.
Yep.
And it doesn't feel like we get into the meat of it until the last 2 points.
Yeah. Here we go.
So we have a couple bits. 1, every transaction was voluntary. 2, through voluntary transactions, we've moved away from our ideal wealth distribution. 3, any pattern we want to keep would therefore demand that we don't allow people to transact voluntarily. But what of those are we to challenge? Is it this? Maybe somehow, like, maybe we're fine with that. Maybe we would be fine with a world where we achieved the ideal and then moved to another state voluntarily. Is that the line we're trying to take? It feels weird, but...
Ideal wealth distribution is broken. Any pattern would demand we cancel the game or take votes.
What is the other one that we have not been looking at that's above these?
Reason for debate.
Okay.
Yeah. That didn't seem relevant to any of the points being made here. If you accept the assumptions in the charts. Okay. Ask what data it's not showing. Okay.
What data is this not showing?
It's not showing what the people get out of it. It's just focusing on the money. That's got to be it. Like, he's only showing the money and not showing anything else. I am going to try this.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah!
Okay, you had it right.
But that's something we had already been talking about for a while. All right, Nozick, consenting adults must be free to make their own transactions, yeah?
I've been pretty clear about that.
And patterns have to interfere because any transaction breaks their vision of justice?
Indeed. Money has moved. The distribution of wealth will no longer comply with the specified goal.
I get it. On the surface, that seems hard to argue with. That's because you're dealing with surface analysis of transactions.
Excuse me?
This entire time you've been talking about patterns in transactions that track only one variable. Monetary wealth. But cold hard cash is only one thing individuals can value. And the model gets more complicated if we acknowledge that.
What do you mean, Ariadne?
Let's say we track another type of wealth. How about, I don't know, happiness? Oh no.
Oh no, we're doing
Andy.
utilitarianism
What are you
now.
doing?
Okay, now I understand the line of reasoning
I understand where we're going with
Because I was going to say, economists would have no problem with this. And because, like, yeah, we're just saying that, yes, money is the abstraction for things people want. Sure, there are other things. People choose to pay for them with money voluntarily. That's fine.
Yeah.
And here we're getting into, okay, so let's say we accept that. We measure utility in general.
But she doesn't know what's about to come get her. It's a big monster. Still a bit of nostalgia for utilitarianism, I guess. If we add happiness to our assessment of transactions, we get a starting state like this.
What is?
Imagined up a widescreen, baby. Increases my happiness not to use archaic slides. This is our starting point, right? H1. Though the people all have money, they're not super happy. They may even have a little negative happiness. These sad sacks are so emotionally dependent on sports, and no sports are happening. But after the game, we get this H2. Even though the non-wilts lost money, they gained greater happiness. Total comfort is better than when we started, which makes sense as why people wanted to see the game in the first place. Suddenly it seems less a pattern that would have to interfere. The results were positive for all.
Fascinating point you've made there, Ariadne Jones. What a fascinating point you've made.
But if the game's terrible and the fans are charged $1 billion, H3. Wow, those are some sad, sad bars for everyone but Wilt. Seems more like something we would want to interfere with. The non-Wilts are left with so little, future transactions would grind to a halt.
I'm no accountant, but this math checks out.
Nozick! To assume all patterns would constantly interfere requires a lack of nuance. Possible to design rules that only protect us from intense edge cases that otherwise leave our autonomy intact. And then, wilt or non-wilt, we'd all have a sporting chance.
There we go.
Touchdown!
Well, astutely put, Miss Jones. Using your own charts was a nice touch. Now, if we could consider for a moment how we should go about designing such a pattern.
Let me guess, by using the original position?
Well, since you mention it,
Ho ho ho! Let's not invest too much stock in Ariadne's charts just yet. After all, they're likely to crash the market.
I think I raised pretty solid points.
Your argument was clever, but does not match to the strength of my convictions. Very little interference from the government can be justified, and what you've described doesn't fit the bill. We shouldn't intervene just because an exchange might make one of the parties a little sad. Only a minarchist?
I think minarchist.
Minarchist state. Is that a real term?
Yeah.
I don't know this term.
A state that governs as little as possible.
I
So as opposed to anarchist, no government, minarchist, as little government as
little
possible.
government as possible.
Like
Okay.
like John Locke and his Night Watchman state that exists only to protect life, liberty, and property. In a way, Nozick is an heir to Locke, just
Mhm.
like Rawls is, but different parts of Locke's views, where Nozick is very much taking that government should only be there for life, liberty, and property, and that's the only justifiable thing government should do, and let's start from there and reason abstractly about where that takes us. Whereas Rawls is very much like taking the other parts of liberalism.
Right.
Like, yes, government needs to be about a social contract that has the consent of the governed. How do we use that to come up with what the best sort of government would look like? The one that people could consent to. Different angles, different heirs to liberalism of different sorts.
Hey, Nozick, how come you're missing the top button of your sweater, of your vest there?
I dropped it at some point and don't have the time to imagine a new one up. Only a minarchist state can give the people the autonomy they deserve.
A minarchist state? What does that mean? Marx introduced the idea of anarchism earlier. Is that related?
Much of my work was in response to the call of anarchism. I could see the appeal, though my variant of choice was anarcho-capitalism. But a minarchist state is a better option for a variety of reasons. Much can be accomplished with very slight government. Our world starts wholly unowned, and anyone can lay claim to it.
Pressing F to doubt.
Woo! Baby!
Individuals can claim as much property as they're able with little limitation, but once claimed goods must be able to be freely exchanged, without theft, force, or fraud. A minimal state would therefore be formed to protect against such aggression. This state exists only as a night watchman, taking action against those who violate these principles. Yes, individuals have rights, and there are things no person or group may do to them. Only the barest minimum state is needed to properly enforce this order.
And that state basically just protects people's stuff?
Rights are less a matter of freedom to than they are freedom from. They define not what I'm allowed to do, but what you're not allowed to do to me. And as a result, anything that does not explicitly harm another individual is fair game. Whether I'm poor or rich, I should be free to use my holdings as I see fit.
Right, because the poor have so many holdings to work with. See, this is why I can't stand libertarians.
More or less than communists? Because you were pretty prickly with Marx, too.
They're all terrible. Humanity is hopeless, and all our political constructs are trash. Like me and the worms. On the floor, to which I shall return now.
Why are there worms in the intelligible realm?
I've imagined them here.
She's imagined them for herself, just to make herself feel worse.
I must
Okay, to be
have
fair-
deserving companions, worthy of my lowly stature.
To be fair, that's something I would absolutely do. It's good that I can't physically manifest the things around me in the world to make my depression feel more authentic.
Oh God, reality warper with clinical depression.
Oh.
Just makes the world actually become the worst of all possible worlds in like a 50-foot radius around themselves.
Oh. Okay, she's definitely getting worse.
Well, seeing as Robert has already presented his ideas, perhaps we can engage with them and see for ourselves.
Right.
This is a fun one though, because on the one hand, there's parts of this that seem utterly ridiculous, but there's other parts that seem like pretty sympathetic, right? Like if I'm doing a thing and it doesn't hurt other people, why should the government stop me? It's the same argument we might use to say, oh, isn't it fine that I'm gay? It's no skin off your back if I'm gay.
Yeah.
What right does the government have to stop me?
And that's why I can see the appeal of the initial appeal of something like that. Because you're right. Like, the starting from the idea that, or not starting from that idea, but like the idea that like if it ain't affecting you, Joe, like why does it fucking matter what I do? I think he has a very interesting idea though of what not affecting someone else means.
Indeed he does.
Right, I think that's where the lie is here. Not the lie, but I think that's where the rub is that not affecting someone else has some strange limitations that seem to be very specifically chosen. Anyway, our world starts wholly unowned and anyone can lay claim to it. Wait, what? What do you mean by that?
The world started as an untamed wilderness, ripe for the taking.
Sorry, is it pressing F to doubt or is it F to pay respects? Is it X to doubt?
No, I think it's both.
Okay. I can't remember the memes. I might have it messed up.
I think it depends on whether or not you're using a controller or a keyboard. The bindings might be different.
There's a specific screenshot,
I know there's a
though, that I'm
specific
thinking of.
screenshot. I think it's press, or is it press X to Jason?
That also, I was also thinking of that.
If you go to the one thing I do appreciate is that the Know Your Meme page always has the very first instance of every meme that they can find.
It is press X to doubt. I was confusing it with press F to pay respects.
So they were playing on it with a controller then, or a very oddly mapped keyboard. What evidence do you have to support your statement?
Do you believe the world started divided into countries, states, cities, and farms? Humanity had to claim areas they found desirable, build a fence, mix labor with local resources, come to own them.
Because that's definitely how it happened. There wasn't any history of thousands of years of brutal oppression involved in that process. It was just we voluntarily homesteaded, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. And what about, and it's not, and of course it's the case that every single society that has existed has also come to the same idea of ownership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially of stuff like land, right?
Yeah.
There haven't been no examples of other societies that have not held that same principle about ownership of land, ownership of property that might be owned by like, say, a small group of people or town site. None of that. It's only been the way he's described. Well, sure, since humans weren't everywhere initially, but what if the raccoons got it first?
High five me.
But what about animals? They have territory that they've claimed, right?
Sure, I dedicated a section of my book to this very topic. Animals are rarely valued by my colleagues, but I believe animals count for something. Higher animals at least should be given weight in deliberations about what to do. Suppose you could view animals as having their own claims and alter the principles of libertarianism accordingly. Where they roam, they own.
I have a new political ideology.
What?
I have a new political ideology.
Yeah.
Hardcore vegan animal rights libertarianism. Absolute non-aggression principle individual rights is the only foundation of government, but it applies to all living beings.
Oh, that sounds wholly untenable.
There's a night watchman state, but it has to prevent foxes from eating chickens.
See, but I've got feelings about that because, like, chickens are foxes' diet, right? That's what that's what they've evolved to eat. Are you denying that the fox should be able to, like, do what it's been, live the life that it's been evolutionarily channeled into?
I mean, it affects someone else and wasn't voluntary.
And thus every carnivore died. That's not a position I hold.
Oh, that's not a position I hold, but it's certainly a matter worth pondering.
I'm coming up with so many good new cursed political ideologies today.
All of these are awful.
If we do real good, I can make a whole new 4-quadrant chart by the time we get through this series. So I'm at only the bottom 2 corners at the moment. So we need 2 more.
How is this related to your conclusion?
This establishes that there's ample room for individuals to make their mark on the world. Individuals can claim as much property as they're able with little limitation.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
It's up to individuals to claim as much of the unclaimed as they can.
You also said with little limitations, so is there some limitation?
Sure, a little thing I call the Lockean Provisio.
Oh no, you named it after him? His ego's big enough already.
Well, I did this decades ago, so perhaps I'm partially responsible. Regardless, the proviso up stipulates all claims are acceptable unless the claim actively makes life worse for other individuals.
What? That's such a cop-out, and also could, like, be very easily twisted to make most claims of property not tenable. My life's worse because I don't get to use your copy of the Nintendo. I don't get to use your Nintendo Switch.
I think what he's going to say to that is, you don't get to use it now. So it's not making your life worse if you still don't get to use it. It would be making your life worse if you had it and I took it away, and then you went from being able to use it to being unable. What we're looking at is it transitions from a state A to a state B. It's not a claim is unacceptable if it makes my life worse than it ideally would be in some scenario. Of course, there's some ideal scenario where my life is better. It makes it actively, concretely worse when we make that than it is now. I think that's going to be the line.
So the Omolus kid is owed nothing. That's what I'm hearing right now.
I mean, they have to put the kid in the Omelas hole, and I think
no. We're assuming like we've got first principles here, right? We're not talking about. We're looking at it as right now, and as it is, nothing can make this kid's life worse.
It's a principle that will kick in very rarely.
Seems like an important part of your structure. Can you update your argument to reflect that?
Sure. There are limits on how much property someone can claim as long as others' prospects are not directly worsened.
And what do you mean by that?
Statement's functionally the same as before. Individuals are free to claim as much as they can as long as it doesn't block others from their needs.
this is a spicy one, though, right?
Yeah, like I was quiet for a moment because I'm like, this feels really spicy.
Let's do a thought experiment.
Okay, I'm here. I'm here for it. I'm thinking.
We're locked in a room together.
Okay.
There is no ventilation.
Shit.
There's a finite amount of oxygen to breathe.
Yep.
How much can I breathe?
Exactly half of it.
But
Exactly half. You do any more than that, you're infringing on my air.
if I were to breathe less than that, you would live longer and you'd have a chance to potentially survive until someone opens the room or something in a way that you don't if we do half. I think this,
Sure,
we're talking about, but this, we haven't claimed the air yet. The air's just there. We just woke up in this room.
Oh,
So-
I woke up first? I claim it. It's mine.
But seriously,
okay,
though,
sorry.
This
Yeah,
is
I'm
this is an interesting, I think, experiment. If we have a finite amount of this unclaimed resource, air,
Yep.
how much can we claim before it is directly worsening someone's prospects? Any amount I claim, in fact, worsens your prospect. Each breath I breathe is one that you can't. That's one less breath you have to survive.
That's a fascinating argument because the end result is like no one gets to claim things that are too valuable.
And
Which
this isn't just a thought experiment, though, because there's a huge number of finite natural resources that we are low on, and that the more of them we claim, the less is available for others, and that already have very real consequences in the real world.
I kind of like this.
Yeah.
No one gets iPhones. Sorry, we're just going to stop using rare earth minerals. What evidence do you have to support that statement?
Suppose you come across the only oasis in the desert and string a hammock between two trees. Should you thereby come to own the whole oasis?
No.
Of course not. If you claim this limited necessity for yourself, you would condemn all others who need to cross the desert. Suppose you develop a novel cure for cancer and claim intellectual property rights to it and want to charge people exorbitant prices to use it. Should the state grant a patent that allows you to do this?
This also no? Gonna be honest, kind of guessing here.
Oh, I'd say it's a yes. Others could find another cure after all.
I find this very funny. I find this
So
very
then find
funny.
another oasis.
Yeah. I think that Nozick should commit. I think that he is unwilling to commit to the fullness of his views and its consequences here. There's not that much different from finding an oasis, setting up shop there, building your house, and calling it yours and kicking other people out than it is between inventing or discovering a cure to a serious disease and then charging a price that means most people can't have it. Either way, you've done a thing that you've legitimately put your labor into. Yeah, and you were legitimately the first to find, but that also involves the deaths of many other people. If you think that's fine, based on principles of, claiming unclaimed property by mixing your labor with it or whatever, do it. Be consistent.
Yeah, because it just comes across to me as really, like, his positions come across to me here as really inconsistent.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this isn't a consistent position he's taken.
That's my thought, at least.
And with the property right to the cure, you should be free to sell the resulting drug for whatever sum you wish.
Have I talked about, though, I also think it's wild that folks who believe in strong property rights also believe in intellectual property. Because intellectual property is not property.
I agree, but I don't know how you're making this point right now, so string it out for me.
So, Nozick says that things that I do that don't materially harm you in some way are fine.
Right.
If I copy your floppy, if I download your latest album on Napster or whatever,
sure,
I don't deprive you of anything. You still have your album.
Yep.
It is not the same as a physical piece of property. If I steal your album from you, if I steal your floppy disk from you, you are deprived of a thing. But it is not the same if I am to copy and pirate it. What we talk about with intellectual property rights has not got much to do with property at all. If you have the intellectual property right over this cure, what you actually have is the right to stop anybody else from using their own property to manufacture and distribute this cure.
Right.
They would not take a single piece of property from you. They would not take a single dollar from your bank account to do it.
What they've stolen is so what it actually defends then is the right to sell that to people.
Yes.
There's that implicit.
But not just the right to sell that to people, the right to stop other people from using their own property in a particular way. That's what an intellectual property right is. It is a state-granted monopoly over particular ways of doing things, over particular actions, particular ideas, particular products.
Fucked up.
And that's why libertarians should agree with me that all intellectual property law should be removed.
The thing is, I agree with you here because I think it's remarkable. How is that related to your conclusion?
I'm actually really curious now what Nozick thought about IP. I'm going to Google that later.
I'll have to talk to myself for a while now, so you can Google it while I talk to myself. It establishes how individuals come to own property and specifies the one limitation that regulates the process.
But once claimed goods must be able to be freely exchanged without theft, force, or fraud. What do you mean by that?
Individuals must be able to seek whatever transactions they desire. To do so, they must also be confident they won't be coerced or misled. A free market is hardly free if your decisions are made under threat of force, after all.
And what evidence do you have to support that statement?
While people can lay claim to many things, it is impossible for anyone to claim everything. Follows that individuals will both control goods that others need, and need goods controlled by others. So once private property has been appropriated, we are morally required to have a free market. That way people can request and trade assets they own for assets they want.
And what, we're just okay with the results no matter what happens?
If somewhere in the chain of transactions, theft, coercion, or fraud occurred, we could safely say the property involved is unjustly held. The minarchist state should then intervene.
Okay, so it should intervene always.
But otherwise, all holdings can be considered just.
Spicy. God!
Find me a piece of property that did not have theft, coercion, or something else involved somewhere along the chain of things.
This ball of earwax I just got out of my own ear.
You live in America. How did we get here?
Okay, yes. How did I get to the position I am in where I can get that wax? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying. And how's that related to your conclusion? But for the record, I don't disagree with you. I was being.
Yeah.
I just want to be super clear on that. How's that related to your conclusion?
This establishes how individuals can exchange property, profiting off their various holdings and creations.
A minimal state would therefore form to protect against such aggression. Wait, what do you mean by that?
Individuals do not have a right to threaten or coerce others, but they do have a right to punish those who do. Value is commonly referred to as the non-aggression principle. But as you discussed with Locke, individual responses are difficult, so we need a minimal state to carry out such punishments.
What evidence do you have to support that statement?
This follows the model of many of my predecessors. Locke, Hobbes, Rousseau. People seek agreements that protect their rights. In the free market, individuals would voluntarily contract others who provide protection services. These transactions would form a network of private security, a minimal state created without even trying. People will opt for the version that best suits them. Any violating companies would have their services replaced with another.
There's no way that could go horribly wrong, right?
No, not at all. What if these security agencies attack those who are not under contract?
Fair question. A few more charts on the subject of interplay between.
No more charts.
Oh, okay, fine, I will summarize. All will learn that warfare is not in the interest of the security companies nor their clients.
That stopped people from doing warfare already, right?
Yeah, definitely. And how's that related to your conclusion?
This establishes how the state could be consistent with the principles of libertarianism. Simply that such a state is something people would agree to without coercion.
And this state exists only as our night watchman, taking action against those who violate these principles. What do you mean by that?
By night watchman, I mean the minimal state does not involve itself in the lives of citizens, except to protect against the aggression of others. Bodies that provide such protection are justified. Courts, police, military. Any more extensive state will violate a person's right to not be forced to participate, and is unjustified.
What evidence do you have to support that statement?
This should be an intuitive extension of our natural ownership of ourselves, but I'll explain it anyway. If someone steals from you and the government helps track them down, the government is acting in your interest. Similarly, if you lose your rights in a coercive contract, the court should help defend you. But let's say the government taxes you 20% of your wealth and uses that money to build a park. Did you care about that park? Maybe, but you did not get to choose. You might have wanted to use that money on a school or to build a house. Seizing the results of someone's labor is equivalent to stealing hours from him and directing him to carry on various activities. In short, taxation of earnings from labor is on par with forced labor.
Seems pretty extreme.
Really? Taxation is slavery? That's where we're going here?
Do
I really need to explain why that seems a little much?
may have overstated my point. Obviously, the conditions of actual forced labor are abhorrent, but even so, I did not consent to how my wealth was used, so I believe my overall reasoning stand. Consent is always key. That's right, Nozick! Consent is always key.
Whew, buddy. How's that related to your conclusion, by the way?
This establishes why a minarchist state is the best option, and the extent to which government is still necessary.
God, Nozick reminds me of Franklin Tucker.
Your political opponent?
The jerk wants to get rid of every program we have and spins it in the name of justice. He even uses the same everyman comparisons. These programs only work by taking from someone else, like poor, defenseless Elon Musk.
What was he up to in that year?
In what?
Was that like in like around 2016-ish? Was that before he had completely gone mask off?
Yes.
Okay. Because there was a time when I was rooting for him, right? Before
The cool guy who wants to go to space and makes electric cars,
Right.
sure.
Like, I'm not going to pretend I wasn't above the appeal of real life Iron Man, right? Who doesn't? Knowing what I do now, it's impossible to justify that, but it's not like I also wasn't taken in by that.
I hate Franklin Tucker, and he's going to win, Adney. He's going to win.
He'll definitely win if we don't get you out of here. Come on, let's get back to it. All right. So what have we got to work with here? Reason for debate, utility beyond money, covert fascist, limited resources, self-interests. Does this also come back to self-interest somehow?
I'm curious. World starts wholly on no limits as long as others' prospects are not directly worsened. Is this going to be limited resources here? But resources are limited, so in many cases, claiming any amount worsens someone's prospects.
Yeah, I feel like... Right, it's like you can't find another oasis, right?
Okay, good. So my "we got thrown in a room with no air" thought experiment was valid. I was on the right track.
Nozick, you were so pleased when I challenged Rawls' ideal of unity with the realities of our non-ideal world.
Of course, the veil of ignorance can only exist in the realm of theory. People cannot simply discard their self-interest.
Do you believe your philosophy avoids similar pitfalls?
The rights of individuals are at its core, so individuals will find little to complain about.
I am not so sure. Because instead of worrying about the government, they now have to worry about every other person on the planet.
Do explain, Ariadne Jones.
In Nozick's case, the core issue is not human nature, but the nature of the world. Because no matter how clever you are, there are only so many goods to claim, right? Eventually, someone's going to get shut out.
But I accounted for that.
Right, the Lockean Provisio, allowing us to block transactions that harm others. You argue this Provisio rarely matters. And I guess I could believe that if the world was largely unoccupied. But in a world that's densely populated where resources are not adequately distributed, in other words, our world, you could easily make the argument that every claim does harm. First time someone says I own this, someone down the chain could starve.
Huh.
Come to think of it, that's the argument Marx made, isn't it? You've opened the door to the very philosophy you despise most.
That unkempt.
So here we go, Nozick. When placed in the real world, the Lockean Provisio kicks in far more often than you intended. Your protection of property rights is hardly pure at all.
Well stated once again, Ariadne Jones.
It really was.
If only there were a metric more nuanced than the Lockean Proviso. I may have some thoughts on that very subject.
Did you say Proviso?
Proviso?
Oh, Proviso.
I also don't know how to say this out loud. I've only seen it written out loud.
Have I been saying Provisio? Have I been adding the I in there?
I think so.
God damn it.
But I also don't know that mine's correct.
Well, shucks, John. You should have spoken up earlier.
He tried, but you nonsensed over it.
Oh, I guess that's true. Apologies, John. I got carried away.
It's not a big deal. Shall we continue?
Please.
Well then, only one thing to do.
You ready?
Yep.
Change places!
How do they do that so quickly?
Luckily, Miss Jones' objection leads nicely to what I wish to say. While the veil of ignorance is a thought experiment, it serves to create an honest assessment of the world as it is. The various constraints and strains of society were very much on my mind. Now, as Miss Jones has said and as Robert has demonstrated, some people will always struggle to see beyond themselves. Nonetheless, I believe the original position can identify an approach that will reach a critical threshold of support. When society is assessed from the original position, it becomes clear we must organize society to maximize the well-being of the least favored. This means some things are distributed equally, rights and freedoms. And a comfortable standard of living must be guaranteed for all citizens, so even the worst off have an incentive to cooperate. But forms of inequality that benefit everyone should be allowed. For example, higher pay for the harder working makes it possible for all to achieve a better life. Structured this way, a society is created that all would be willing to participate in.
See, here you get the differing vision of liberalism. They both share some of this.
Yeah.
And here you get the, equality of opportunity, not equality of outcomes thing that you're going to hear Democrats talk about a lot. That's Rawls' version of this.
But his version of it can also crucially comes with the part of there is a baseline guaranteed for everyone.
Yeah.
Whether he's saying if you work hard, you should be able to get more for that. But also whether or not you work hard shouldn't have an effect on whether or not you can achieve a baseline standard of living.
Yeah.
Oh, God, those social programs.
I hope that was clear enough. Through the lens of the original position, we can structure society for the betterment of all. It is, in fact, the only society that can adequately correct for past actions which have disenfranchised so many.
Historical injustice added to the slate. Society has been warped by a number of historical injustices, guaranteeing unnatural advantage and disadvantage. Right, it's the whole thing of, even after you've, decided, even after making attempts to amend past wrongs, you still have the whole weight of those generations of wrongs that have led to this point. It's not like that didn't happen, right? And it's not like you can steadily be like, all right, we're all equal now, and then say go, and that the race is going to be fair.
Oh, I will admit it seems important to rectify the corrupt transactions of the past. But to do so justly, we'll need to somehow assess every exchange over hundreds of years. Such a task seems incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
Well, working for the original position, we can naturally correct for these injustices.
Well, Ariadne, looks like we've got our work cut out for us.
You mean I've got my work cut out for me? You'll just vaguely gesture at ideas again.
Haha, you're right, I will. Oh, look, worms. Hello. Oh, nope. That's where that worm is roaming, Miss Pythia Smith. You cannot go there. It's roaming, it's owning.
All right. When egalitarian governance, right? When society is assessed from the original position, it becomes clear we must organize society to maximize the well-being of the least favored. What do you mean by that?
Those in the original position don't know what kind of person they will be. As a result, they will want to make sure even the most worst off has a shot at a decent life.
And what evidence do you have to support that statement?
This sort of decision-making is a matter of risk management. You still have some degree of self-interest in the original position, you just don't know who the self is. The scariest possibility is that you emerge and find yourself among the most destitute. So it makes sense to apply a maxi-min approach, where you maximize your lowest values. This ensures those at the bottom still have something meaningful to work with, and no matter where you wind up, you will as well.
Can I detour real quick here?
Yeah?
Onto something about that's kind of bothering me.
Yeah?
I love the, I can see that there's a lot to enjoy about this. But I feel like even in practice, asking someone to do that is kind of, I don't know, maybe impossible? Because someone who has no knowledge of where they are has no idea what the lived experience of someone with certain traits is going to be like, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people who are not trans themselves or have not or do not know anything about what it means to be transgender to be creating laws about me as a transgender person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if someone in the original position are we assuming that they then have the full suite of knowledge of what it means to live as a person who's transgender, or what it means to live as someone who's black in a country that has historically oppressed them? Are we assuming that they know those things, or are we just saying they don't matter?
I think...
Help me out here, because I feel like I must be misunderstanding something.
Two things. One is that we're not saying folks should ultimately make all decisions in the original position. We know that we can't do that. We think we can use the original position to derive some principles that we can agree on, and then use those principles to decide. So here's one of those, the maxi-min principle. If you didn't know whether you'd end up very bad off or very well off, you'd want to minimize the chance you end up in a terrible outcome. And so you'd want to choose principles where you maximize how good things are, even if you're in the worst case scenario. That's a principle that we can make that doesn't require us to know the specific cases to make it.
Okay.
It's a general principle that we're deciding on in this original position, and that we can then apply.
Okay.
I think the other is, it's an ideal situation. So sure, if it's helpful, we can assume perfect knowledge, whatever it takes to make this ideal thought experiment more useful.
I see. Okay.
Well, thank you.
How's that related to your conclusion, by the way?
This establishes an outline of the principles we would reach, a scaffolding, if you will.
This means some things are distributed equally, rights and freedoms. And what do you mean by that?
Anything we determine to be rights should be allocated to everyone.
Cool. And what evidence do you have to support that statement?
This is a fairly common philosophical ideal at this point, and one Robert and I share. Because it's a fantastic idea.
Yep, Locke's still hanging around.
It's true, though it's also plain that we disagree to the exact nature and extent of those rights.
Regardless, every citizen must be guaranteed an adequate scheme of basic liberties, compatible with other people also having those rights. The opportunity to run for office, to speak freely, to defend themselves against accusations.
And how's that related to your conclusion?
As it dives a bit deeper into some of the liberties we want to protect.
And a comfortable standard of living must be guaranteed for all citizens, so even the worst off have incentive to cooperate. And what do you mean by that?
It is inhumane to choose a structure where some can barely live. This is always true, but becomes more clear when we picture ourselves among the dispossessed.
What evidence do you have to support that statement?
This is an intuitive guarantee under the maxi-min approach. If the poorest are destitute, lacking even food and shelter, all their efforts go towards basic survival. It's impossible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you have no boots to pull on.
True.
It's impossible to do even with boots, and the impossibility was the original intent of the phrase, but I digress.
I do feel like that's another one that's kind of gotten lost over time, like what it means to act. Like, the point of pulling yourself by your bootstraps is that it's impossible.
Yep.
By setting aside an adequate amount for everyone, we ensure everyone has an opportunity to pursue a better life.
Or just lays around.
That does become a possibility, but having a few beneficiaries who don't give back is a small price to pay for the good of all. And besides, my next statement will show why people will still be incentivized to aim higher.
And how's that connected to your conclusion?
This establishes how we improve the lives for those at the bottom, furthering willing cooperation.
Forms of inequality that benefit everyone should be allowed. For example, higher pay for the harder working makes it possible for all to achieve to a better life. What do you mean by that?
Not all inequality is detrimental to society. Certain permissions can result in a world that is better off for all.
And what evidence do you have to support that statement?
Those in the original position may not know where they will wind up, but they know they will want an opportunity to grow. It is for the betterment of society that those who are exceptionally skilled are rewarded for applying those skills. This prevents the ambitious from becoming resentful. They get a favored position in a stable system with lots of cooperation and few discontents.
I see, so you still believe society would have some economic engine at its core, just a carefully controlled one.
That's called socialism. This is very clearly socialism.
It's very not.
That word is not deserving of the negative associations it has, but it does have those associations, so I prefer to avoid it.
You should have just owned it, John. Joined the great revolutionaries.
All right, let's walk this back a bit. How's that related to your conclusion, by the way?
This establishes that the society we would build provides external motivations for participation. There is still economic mobility within an egalitarian society. It doesn't demand we all stay at the same level. It's a counter of sorts to Robert's fear of constant interference.
Structured this way, a society is created that all would be willing to participate in. What do you mean by that?
An egalitarian society is a society that is hard to object to. Any rational analysis, after all, reveals that it provides opportunity to all.
It's starting to feel familiar. And what evidence do you have to support that statement?
Well, I can't see a reason to doubt it. Any rational person can look at this sort of society and see opportunities for all. If achieved, it would be in everyone's best interest to maintain it.
And how's that related to your conclusion?
This is the conclusion. It illustrates how the principles chosen are in the interest of all. And as society is in the interest of all, it will draw forth the cooperation of all, will it not?
Well...
That's another big assumption.
Yeah, because again, it's...
Self-interest.
I feel like both self-interest and limited resources are good objections here. Well, got any tips for me, Nozick?
I've got nothing new for you. This feels the same as before. You've already heard my response to this sort of philosophy. While I can appreciate what he's going for, it still doesn't work for me. You're going to have to trust yourself on this one.
Wait, so I don't even get vague gestures this time?
Like, it's...
Although we did get historical injustice added to the slate this time, but it feels like both of these are, like, as much as I do want to believe in an egalitarian society, right? We have, and I do believe something like that is possible. It does have to contend with the reality that there are only so many things to go around, right? That is a legitimate problem it has to contend with. Maybe not an insurmountable one, but...
Mm-hmm. I think the self-interest objection still stands too, because, we've established that this is a system that would benefit all, but there are certainly other systems that in practice would benefit some people more than this one if we were less egalitarian. And in fact, we see people frequently voting for changes to make society less egalitarian than it now is in order to benefit themselves.
Yes, yeah.
So why would we suppose that just because we can rationally see that this system is beneficial to all, that folks wouldn't nevertheless choose something that hurts everybody else to benefit themselves more?
Right. What was it that one Trump voter was on the record saying in front of the... He's not hurting the people he needs to hurt.
Yeah.
Like, saying the quiet part aloud here. That some people do just believe that other people should be worse off.
Yeah, that's another part. I wasn't even going for that. I was just going for people will be selfish, and even knowing that a system that is egalitarian benefits them, they'd selfishly choose something that benefits them more. But yours is another good point, that people indeed don't just have motives that are self-interested. They often have self-destructive motives to inflict harm on people they dislike at no benefit to themselves.
Right.
Just out of the hate that's been inculcated in them and the...
Yeah, and it's like, that's Comfortable standard of living must be guaranteed for all citizens. I wonder if we challenge this with limited resources, if he'll have a response to it, but
Let's
it won't
try
be
it.
the right one.
Let's try it.
That's what I'm betting here, is that he will have something to say about it, but it's not going to be the correct answer. Got it.
Got it. You are the game's master.
I am so good at this game. Rolf's guaranteeing a basic standard of living for everyone seems like a nice plan, but what if there are not enough essentials to go around? You yourself brought up the constraint of limited resources.
I believe Kropotkin established why this is not the case. In general, we are capable of building enough necessities for all. Resources are mainly limited in the face of Nozickian hoarding. And even though some inequality would be allowed, inequality great enough to make a livable baseline impossible would not. While Kropotkin's anarcho-communist society was not organized enough to manage that allocation, one managed from the original position would be.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, good. I'm glad at that. It's like, yeah, he does have something to say about it, but it's not a real hurtful objection. It's like, yeah, sure, but we can.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what we wanted to then look at was
All would be willing. But would they? Really?
no, it did. The music's gone.
Okay.
Nonsense.
That's the quietest nonsense, the quietest, most dejected nonsense.
I know, because arguing against this means, the argument against this is that not everyone would willingly want to have an egalitarian society, which is, when you think about it, a really horrible thing to. If you're the kind of person who gets despondent about realities of the world, that's one that could send you for a couple days being like, wow, the world I live in is not a world where everyone would willingly choose to participate in a system that would be beneficial to all. Oh, that kind of sucks.
What was that? That's the weakest nonsense I've ever heard.
I have to agree. Miss Jones is your throat, okay? If you'd like to try again, Ariadne, I could fetch you the idea of water.
Water won't help. Just my objection isn't really satisfying. In fact, it's kind of depressing. It definitely won't help shake Mom from her stupor.
Well, I'm prepared to hear it regardless.
I also like that Ari's exactly as despondent about this as
Yeah.
Rawls, you've done a great job of showing up your system and explaining how you believe any reasonable person could support it. But when run through the gauntlet of self-interest, I'm still not sure people would rally behind it. Your problem is the same as before. Some will feel that this approach holds them back. They'll do whatever they can to break those constraints and further their own goals. And who knows, they might just succeed.
So that's it, huh? The ultimate critique I cannot escape is that I expect too much from humanity.
I mean, when you put it that way, yeah.
Yep. Sucks, but yes.
Again, I am definitely the kind of person who has spent a time being really actively depressed over some very concrete philosophical truths about the world. And if I was in a mood like that right now, if I hadn't dealt with this before, that's one that would get me. Your whole reason for pursuing this philosophy was to counter such self-interest. If everyone went behind the veil once in a while, the world might be a better place, but we don't live lives entirely separate from ourselves. We can only imagine such lives, and while they make a strong case for that being a good thing to do, some won't succeed. Others won't even want to try.
You've given me much to think about, Miss Jones. Just like everyone else, we've met much to think about, but nothing that actually works. Well, if that's the best critique she's got, I must be exceeding expectations. And I have infinite time to think of a way to get everyone on board, don't I?
I mean, best of luck, John. But have you considered, perhaps, uniting everyone behind one system is a fool's errand? You can't satisfy everybody, especially when there are some who will be dissatisfied as long as others are satisfied.
And what would you have us do instead?
Acknowledge that people are different. The best of all possible worlds for me will not be the best of all possible worlds for you.
That much is obvious.
But you know what? Accepting this fact is the key that unlocks success. Upon the foundation of libertarianism, we'll build a framework that does work for everyone.
Really? How are you going to pull that off?
What do you say, John? One last round?
One last round.
Change places! as I was saying,
Oh, we've got another one?
Yeah,
Oh, are we going to run out of time in this recording session?
that'll be funny if true.
if we truly believe in the rights of individuals, we must accept the fact that different individuals will prefer different societies. The ideal utopia would thus consist of many smaller utopias, divergent communities in which people live different lives. Society would constantly create new communities. Everyone would be free to move between them, seeking the society they desire most.
This sounds like the premise of a sci-fi novel I was reading a while back, a web novel.
Yeah, have you read Isn't the Diamond Age this?
The Diamond Age has a little bit of this, yeah. But I was thinking of... It's actually spoilers.
Oh, fuck.
It's spoilers to say it.
Fuck.
But it's a web novel that I was reading. And one of the very, very, very... Like, once the whole first act is done, which takes its own long time, this is one of the principles of the second, is that the first takes place in a society like that.
The overarching government is still minarchist, existing only to enforce these freedoms and stop those who would interfere. There we go, the pinnacle of my philosophy. Any form of community may be established within the framework. It is compatible with all utopian visions, while guaranteeing none. Dare say I've accomplished the Rawlsian goal better than Rawls, creating a system no one can object to.
Really? No one at all.
Well, almost no one. Imperialist utopians might run into issues, but all other utopians will be able to realize their ambitions within the framework.
Imperialist utopians? What the fuck does that mean?
Ah, I'm glad we're covering this. Nozick's categorizations of utopians is quite a useful concept.
Thank you, Arbiter. You see, there are 3 types of utopians. Existential utopians, whatever world they desire in mind, but have no problem with others wanting something different. Missionary utopians, like my friend John here, want to persuade everyone to join, but won't go so far as to force them. And then there are the imperialist utopians, who wish to forcibly indoctrinate all into their ideal pattern of community. Imperialist utopians are the only ones the framework would oppose, actively countering their efforts with the society-wide security.
Okay, right, I think I get it now. Ready to ask my questions? Ready to back me up, Rawls?
Always.
Then let's pin down his pinnacle, baby.
Not a euphemism.
If we truly believe in rights of individuals, we must accept that different individuals will prefer different societies. What do you mean by that?
Different people have different values. From this we can conclude they'll have different ideal societies.
What evidence do you have to support that statement?
Throughout your visits here, and surely among the living, you've encountered individuals with very different dreams. What Marx wants is not what Locke wants. What Confucius wants is not what Machiavelli wants.
Machiavelli doesn't seem to know what he wants.
Yes, well, anyone with such terrible ideas was bound to question them eventually. Boom, got him. The point is, with such disparate desires, the idea of a single society could work for everyone. It's incredible. And not incredible as in remarkable, incredible as in literally unbelievable. Without credibility.
How's that related to your conclusion?
This lays the groundwork, reiterating the differences between philosophies.
The ideal utopia would thus consist of many smaller utopias, divergent communities in which people... I've never heard this proposed before. Which is strange.
Yeah, it's funny that we didn't get this in our utopian lit class, huh?
Yeah, like, legitimately, this feels like... And yet, it feels like an idea that is also like... Why didn't anyone think of that before?
Yeah, huh?
But also, it's like... He's already admitting up top it's not a utopia for all. Because some people's idea of utopia is going to be one that isn't compatible with other people's existing. Please clarify that for me.
Though the framework is libertarian and laissez-faire, the communities within need not be. Whether a capitalist state or religious commune, the framework allows for all sorts of sub-societies.
Even like really discriminatory societies?
If all the racial supremacists want to carve out their own tiny pockets of the world, then yes, the framework would allow for that. But it's important to note they would not be allowed to impose on others. No colonial behavior allowed. And anyone who grew sick of such an ideology would have countless viable alternatives. In a way, this could serve to quarantine them from the rest of us.
Hateful societies. Utopias defined by discrimination are allowed, but the framework would stop them from actively targeting other groups. What evidence do you have to support that statement?
Accepting everyone has their own preferences forces us to confront what kind of utopian we are. It's most consistent with libertarianism to adopt an existential utopian approach, to live and let live. If you wish to consent to join a Rawlsian society, that's fine for you. But I don't have to. The framework allows all of our ideals to exist side by side.
How's that related to your conclusion?
This builds on the previous point, to establish a general outline of the ideal society.
Society would constantly create new communities. Everyone would be free to move between them, seeking the society they desire most. What do you mean by that?
Individuals must not be trapped within the society they're born into. People must be able to discover other communities, found new communities, and leave and join societies as they please.
Almost sounds like you're advocating for open borders, but no right-wing politician I've met would ever.
Careful! The world is not cleanly split into right and left. If we truly believe in individualism and personal freedom, ease of travel is essential. If we're not free to seek opportunity, we are hardly free.
All right, how exactly does that work?
Let's say you visited several communities and determined none are for you. Some are close, but none fully aligned. Maybe you met a few others along the way who share your feelings. Framework makes it easy for you to branch out and claim a new space for your ideals. This process and the fact that no one is allowed to impede it will result in an ever-shifting landscape. Some communities will be abandoned, some will struggle or split, others will flourish and gain members and be duplicated elsewhere.
Not to constantly repeat my arguments, but doesn't founding communities have the same limited resource problem as before?
Well, no, not to the same extent, because you won't be starting from scratch. Community forming encourages sharing resources more effectively than a purely individualized approach. You and your ideological allies all want your new community to succeed, after all.
Okay, good. So I'm glad they brought it up because it'd be terrible to just be like, but limited resources again.
Yep. Even though that's a fantastic argument here, because
Yeah.
in a sense, we can't have an unlimited number of utopias because we are always living on planet Earth together. There is
Yep.
nothing I can do that isn't going to impact other people somehow. When I use water in my community, it's water that is no longer available for some other community further down the river. When I drive my car in my community, that emits carbon that affects every other community.
That's CO2 in the atmosphere.
Externalities mean that Nozick's society is impossible.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Unless Matrix.
yes, we got it. We got it. We're at 3 out of 4. We just need one more batshit ideology.
How is this related to your conclusion?
This establishes the full flexibility of the framework, the core that maintains individual freedom, while also allowing freedoms of societies.
All right, these subcommunities form naturally. These subcommunities form naturally from like-minded individuals, starting with territory and wealth they have already accumulated. What do you mean by that?
In the process of forming communities, individuals will pool resources and knowledge with like-minded neighbors. This allows them all to better achieve their collective ambitions.
And those collective ambitions are still consistent with libertarianism?
Of course, the entire effort was created from voluntary transactions. Anyone who does not agree with the ideology would not have to participate.
What evidence do you have to support this statement?
The choice to form a community is a discovery procedure. People will review their options and will want to group with others who agree. On the other hand, people will pass up communities that are unfriendly or simply too different. This deals with the original limitation objection. The ability to freely join communities means you can gain access to that community's resources.
If they want to share them.
Well, yes. But each community must win and hold the voluntary adherence of its members. Leave certain groups at a disadvantage. Socialists are always tempted to be imperialists because they know there would be few volunteers.
That's an extremely debatable, dubious statement.
Well, the framework would give us scaffolding to find out. Allow for as many variants of socialism as you like, provided any can get support.
But it also means like self-interested people are just going to be self-interested in their own little corner. I guess that's fine.
Yeah, he thinks that's great.
He thinks that's fine, yeah. How's that related to your conclusion?
Honestly, this is one of the most important bits. If there are any issues with the process of forming a community, it challenge their whole framework.
Like historical injustices.
Yeah, exactly. Feels like he just put a flashing marker on his weak point. So, yeah, let's keep this statement in mind. The overarching government is still minarchist, existing only to enforce these freedoms and stop those who would interfere. What does that look like? Kind of feels like a version of the federal government and state structure.
If the federal government is extremely limited, then yes, there are parallels. The important part is that it's extremely limited. Government will leave subcommunities alone unless they try to exploit or defraud others.
What evidence do you have to support that statement?
Nothing I've described here deviates dramatically from the ideals of libertarianism. While pocket communities can be diverse, Our overall structure is still nothing more than what it's needed to protect our liberties. The minimal state is supported with the standing army, police force, and courts, but that's all that would be required.
I like how you got a fidget thing so it'd be quieter when you were fidgeting, and then you still drop it anyway.
And it's actually much louder.
How's that related to your conclusion? At least it's not literally our wedding ring.
Yeah.
This establishes the minarchist state I described in my last argument has not changed at its core.
Nozick's presented something I actually haven't heard of before.
He's evolved his minarchist state from one that maintains the rights of individuals to one that maintains the rights of individuals in groups. It's a subtle but significant difference. The question is, what problems affect groups? Are there any his approach does not account for?
I guess we'll have to find out, won't we? I don't see you brooding in the back there, Mom. So I think we look at this one, right?
Yep.
They've already accumulated.
Historical injustice.
Yeah, what about historical injustice, buddy? Like we just said, like you can't just, say like, all right, sorry about that. Here's the starting line, and then expect it to be a fair race.
Nonsense.
I want to review some of your statements, Nozick. Correct me if I get anything wrong, all right? You believe you get around the limited resource problem by allowing people to form communities. Those who don't have enough on their own will join kindred spirits to bolster their cause, like founding a company, I suppose.
This all seems correct.
And communities can become desirable not just because of their ideals, but because of the prosperity of their members.
Of course, wealth is one of many ways a community can strengthen itself.
I have to say, this is an interesting model. To get around disagreements by building your utopia to support such disagreements. It's rather clever.
Thank you, Ariadne. So what sort of sub-society will you form? You're not actually agreeing with my model, are you?
Tell me, Nozick. What happens if the resources are all in the hands of those who disagree with you? Or even worse, those who hate you?
What do you...
The core of this philosophy is that it allows for all sorts of communities. It follows that some will be based on identity, right? Favoring racial, sexual, or cultural purity. To put it less delicately, communities of bigots.
Well, yes, those will exist. They'll be weak, essentially self-quarantined. The framework won't allow them to impose on others.
A nice thought. Let's put it to the test. Is the way wealth is distributed currently the result of any just transactions?
Of course not. History is stained with unfair trade practices by any libertarian standard. We don't do those we could properly sort, and the minarchist state would stop them from going forward.
Properly sort, huh? Tough job for any government, let alone the one that prides itself on minimal interference. We say 2 wrongs don't make a right, but if we can't correct the first wrong, where does that leave us? Those so-called weak groups will start with all of the advantages of history. They can use their ill-gotten gains to throw elaborate hater parties and drink the most expensive haterade. Such societies feel like less like a quarantine and more like a gated community.
I don't believe it. Everyone should be able to...
Wasn't this also, no, I don't remember the title of that, so I'm not gonna get myself stuck in a thing here. Personal liberty is important to you. Hell, it's important to me. But personal liberty works so much better when not bound by the chains of history. When built on a society that's already stratified, your libertarian utopia only reinforces existing issues. In short, your philosophy works best when built upon a fair foundation it will struggle to create. Hey! We maxed out credibility despite getting something wrong.
This is a salient point. I confess I came to question the same issue myself later in life. Seems I must again admit that aspects of my philosophy are woefully...
So, this is it.
What?
Huh?
Nozick's philosophy is crumbling, just like all the rest. All that's left is for Rawls to tear him down and prove once again that none of us have any idea what we're doing.
Now hold on, the core of my philosophy is still...
Come on, Rawls, get it over with. Well, I mean, I'd just finish him.
Mom, stop. You've made your point. This is just another example of how messed up everything...
I will not finish anyone.
What?
Robert has admitted a key fault in his philosophy. I'm glad he is able to do so. I naturally think there are many, many more than the one he admitted, but those are discussions for another day.
Similarly, even though John's conclusions are misguided, he's an excellent check on my impulses. Only the refusal to listen guarantees one against being ensnared by the truth. It's true my ideals work best in a society that is already just, and do little to create a just starting point. I did not fully knit the humane considerations and joint cooperative activities my philosophy allows into its fabric.
I don't believe it. Neither do I. Robert, if you're willing to admit that much, how can you still stand by the core of libertarianism?
Well, constant regulation is still an unjustifiable intrusion after all. But perhaps if victims of the most serious injustices were owed compensation by those who benefited from that injustice as a sort of one-time package.
Interesting to see you, of all people, invent reparations. How do you resolve that with your earlier ideal of a minimal state? After all, different individuals will claim different injustices, unless the situation is assessed from the original position.
Again with the original position, John, I swear to God!
Is that it? Indeed, that is it.
Wow. All right. That was actually kind of amazing.
No?
Both seemed genuinely motivated to build a better world, even if they didn't agree on what that world was. And when Nozick realized his philosophy had some rough implications, he actually reconsidered those aspects. I got more ideas of possible futures from them together than I would have with just one of them.
Well then, Ariadne Jones, has their debate shifted your view? Is there hope for society after all?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. He presented me with the ideal, but will people in the real world reflect and grow like Rawls and Nozick did? Just look at Mom. It took history's greatest thinkers to get her to admit she might be wrong, and the process broke her. How are the worms, Mom?
Wriggly. I'm not broken.
What?
I'm not broken, Adney, or at least I'm putting the pieces back together. And it wasn't the dead philosophers who wore me down, it was you.
What? Me? Why?
Seeing myself and our whole system through your eyes, I thought you avoided politics because of how much of me it took from you. I see now it's about what it took from me. And yet there's been good in my work. I've promoted education, founded Capra. I've even had a few moments like Rawls and Nozick, where after vigorous discussion, an opponent admits I made them reconsider. Only in the face of our political pressures does that all fizzle out. If we could change that...
And how?
I don't know, Pumpkin. It's hard to be a philosopher and a politician. They require two fundamentally different instincts. I still need to be popular to win, and that need can be corrosive. But that doesn't have to mean it's hopeless, it just means we have to be vigilant, because nothing can succeed if we stop ourselves from growing.
Okay. Now I think there's some hope for society.
Wait, was that...
The gate! It's finally open!
Hey! Excellent work, both of you.
Both of us?
You both acknowledge there is room to grow. And for the living, that's enough. I could say something poetic about how if you are not actively growing, you are not truly living, and thus belong among the dead. Is that our fourth political ideology? I think we've got all four.
There we go.
But to be honest, I just thought of that now. Either way, the gate opens to you once more. Your life can carry on as it should. It's so bizarre. I've gotten what I wanted. But I'm still filled with doubt. Is what I wanted actually good?
Winning the election or bringing philosophy to all? Marcus and Jen believe in your dream, and so does Dad. And so do I. And let me tell you, I'm far more likely to vote for you now than when this all started.
You wouldn't have voted for...
I'm kidding, Mom. Mostly.
Arbiter, once I go through that gate, the bridge between worlds will be stabilized. We'll be able to travel freely. Would you like to come with me? Be the first ambassador to my unideal world? After all you've gone through to make this happen, Pythia Smith, how could I not?
Oh shit, real life Arbiter. Well then, I'll see you both on the other side.
See you soon, Pumpkin. Are you ready, Pythia Smith? Not even remotely. On the count of 3. Whatever you need.
Returns to the real world and immediately gets again in like 2 weeks.
Spoilers?
What?
For the first game.
Oh, fuck.
They've been purposely not explaining who he was this entire time.
I didn't realize we were assuming folks hadn't seen the first game. Fuck.
The game has been purposely avoiding it the whole time.
Well, we can bleep it in post.
Fine.
1, 2...
And next time.
Next time.
Smash that like, comment and subscribe.